Hello and welcome to Hot Goth Summer. I'm your host Lucy, and today I'll be sharing a bit behind the scenes of attempting to write a play inspired by, not an adaptation of, Jane Austen's novel Northanger Abbey. It is a coming-of-age tale featuring the imaginative Catherine Morland as she vacations first with family friends in Bath and then befriends and vacations in a manner with the members of the Tilney family. The setting and Catherine's love of Gothic novels of the day, which would have been the 1790s as Jane was writing it, is a crucial plot point to both the actual driven plot and the satire throughout the novel. Austen actually sold Northanger, her first novel, then titled Susan, for £10 in 1803. However, it was shelved by the publisher. She attempted to shop an updated version around of the book, still titled Susan, in 1809, but she said, hey, if not, please give me my manuscript back. The publisher demanded the same as it was sold for, £10, for it to be returned to her, and so it was not until 1816 that Austen repurchased her manuscript and then revised it. Her brother Henry published Northanger with John Murray, along with the novel Persuasion, in December of 1817. Jane wrote Northanger Abbey in her mid-20s, and she was 41 at her death in 1817. The Oxford World Classics edition of Northanger includes this ad. Much of Northanger Abbey uses an adaptation of the woman said to have popularized the Gothic novel genre, Anne Radcliffe. The Mysteries of Udolpho is a broader plot than Northanger. However, it is directly referenced at the beginning of the book when Catherine's new friend Isabella introduces her to the Radcliffe novel. The character of Emily in Udolpho explores a grand manor and has strange discoveries within its chambers, which turn out to be imaginative narratives at the end of Udolpho. Similarly, Catherine judges the owner of Northanger, General Tilney, as a person who is unfeeling about the death of his wife and assumes that she may either be a woman in the attic figure, a la Jane Eyre, and trapped in Northanger's unused areas, or that perhaps Tilney even murdered his former spouse. Catherine manages to offend Henry Tilney, General Tilney's son, with these ideas, and he expresses that his father did love his late mother. After this confrontation, Catherine is distraught and fears that Henry will hate her forever. She realizes that though she loves novels, they aren't reality. For the reality of this presentation, I will examine Catherine's relationship to her surroundings at Northanger after she arrives there, starting at approximately chapter 5, depending on your edition. The timeline of the book has Catherine staying with family friends in Bath and cavorting with Isabella and John Thorpe prior to this. It is interesting to note that Isabella is a character with great hubris, and as stated before, she is the one to introduce Catherine to the Mysteries of Udolpho. While it is clear that Austen appreciates and encourages the art of the novel repeatedly in Northanger, she also makes it clear that the Gothic tropes are ripe for satirization. The Tilneys at the manor, the General, Henry, and Eleanor all make reference to Catherine's imagination, whether subtle, as the General addressing the furniture in the Abbey as functional, when he notices that Catherine is searching for grandeur upon arrival, or in Henry's willingness to joke about her unlimited curiosities about the house and Gothic plots as he drives her towards her stay there. Ironically, or satirically, it is Henry that during Catherine's stay admits that he loves Radcliffe's Udolpho. Eleanor is more of a nonfiction fan, specifically history. Catherine rants then about her disdain for the boring narratives of history, which are all told by men. Henry jokes that some torture is good. After all, Catherine was forced to learn to read, and now she enjoys it, which feels like an allusion to the fact that he has some appreciation for the unusual and is therefore compatible romantically with Catherine. This was also indeed a reference to larger themes in the book of courtship arrangements and women being viewed as transactions and objects, respectively. Bank verbiage is used almost redundantly when concerning courtship ideas in Northanger Abbey, and that is on purpose. This fiscal satire, which is more blunt than in some of Austen's other works, calls attention to Austen's writing Northanger in the 1790s. This is a decade that brings us internationally to a time of deep economic anxiety. British gentry were concerned with the idea of monarchy and aristocratic preservation during the French Revolution. The pound was also struggling to be defined, with the American Revolution lingering and the bank definitions of the American colonies still being determined. Colliding with money is the idea of station, and within Austen's day, one could purchase promotions within the military, also gaining rank. Napoleonic War soldiers remain a lasting theme in multiple Austen works, as well as the temperament and morality of those soldiers. Think Wickham in Pride and Prejudice, and how Darcy saved him after the Lydia scandal by making sure that he maintained a proper rank and station in his post in the military. Tilney, General Tilney, is a nefarious figure in Northanger, assuming the Gothic villain trope. He sends Catherine away from the Abbey late in the book after realizing her friend, John Thorpe, misled him about Catherine's wealth. It is only when Eleanor quickly marries a viscount and uses her friendship in part to persuade her father towards Catherine's favor that Catherine is seen as a suitable match for Henry. I would also like to add a disclaimer and say that I am coming at the economics of this time period from someone of Jane Austen's class, which would be the rural gentry. It is necessary to note that even the rural gentry would be profiting off of the American and British Empire, which would mean plantation labor and the labor of servants within their homes. Another unusual trait of Northanger itself is that as a novel, the third-person narrator directly addresses the audience. It serves as a reality check for the fantastic wanderings of Catherine, and also a judgment towards them and other character actions. In blatant terms, at the end of the book, the narrator links Catherine's discovery of farrier bills and a mystery chest at Northanger as a foreshadowing. Taking a page from our cheeky third-person Northanger narrator, I am now going to give you a little presentational twist. Instead of literally reading the scene that I'm working on, I'm going to detail the characteristics of its plot, setting, and character, and then explain the difference between an adaptation of a work and the idea of a work being inspired by a previous work. The draft that I'm working on, working title, is Hot Goth Summer. I've chosen to update the play to the year setting of 2004 and allude to the town around the manor where Catherine is staying, but it's in an unnamed fancy town on the New York coastline. Catherine in this story is 19 and fully entrenched in the current Gothic music scene. She's home from her first year of college and dropped off at the house of a family friend by parents who think they could be a good influence upon Catherine's alternative tendencies. The other characters remain pretty much the same age as they are in the novel, with some exceptions. Henry has been aged down from 26 to 22 for modernity purposes. Catherine still loves literature, and Gothic literature at that, but the references will change. Udolpho will obviously be included, but so will Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Shirley Jackson's Haunting at Hill House, and beyond. The military, money anxieties, the currencies of the time will remain as themes, but transposed onto that of the United States in 2004. What really drove me to the idea for this play is the idea of the love of reading, which even through her satire, Austen clearly portrays and promotes. All of Catherine's deeper relationships that last to varying degrees, even the eventually antagonistic Isabella, begin with bonding over balls and outings, sure, but also the actual discussion of books between characters in rather long passages. For Austen, as an aspiring novelist, this is a pretty bold move. She's uplifting the works of peers like Radcliffe per se, but she's also uplifting herself and the idea of her novel as a woman novelist and a first-time novelist. It's also radical because, as the character of Eleanor displays through her tendency of nonfiction, women at the time who were published were a hot topic in 1790s England. There weren't very many, and novels themselves were a rather new idea. So the Gothic tones were, frankly, somewhat revolutionary, per Radcliffe. In the scene of focus in Hot Goth Summer for this presentation, Eleanor is the one who leads Catherine into her guest bedroom. This is basically the same as in the novel when Catherine arrives at Northanger. In the book, Catherine discovers her rooms are not cause for alarm, as Henry alluded to when surmising she might have horror going to bed or encounter a violent storm on her second night in the Abbey, as said on pages 115 and 16. After this letdown and a bit of time to herself, Catherine discovers a very large cedar chest and is mesmerized by its possibilities. What secrets could it contain? Eventually, she unlocks the chest, and much to her disappointment, it contains some odds and ends and a paper. The paper excites her. What mysteries? Until she reads it aloud and discovers it is simply the note referenced at the ending, a farrier's bill. In the Hot Goth draft, Catherine still snoops, but she's interrupted by Eleanor, who directly addresses her curiosity of the chest and then drags her away to dinner instead of Catherine breaking the lock. After dinner, in an anxious evening of attempts, she finally breaks into the chest in the early morning and finds papers, which turn out to be an old catering order for a previous party at the house. Disappointed, she reads the contents out loud to herself, and since this is a play format, brings her disappointment to light through a soliloquy. 2000s Catherine is annoyed by the lack of imagination at first encounter everywhere in this mansion. Bland furniture, super practical, but also the embarrassment of riches carelessly tossed into a guest bedroom chest. It is from several years ago, yeah, but clearly the family sustains a grand level of wealth, no matter how plain the decorations of the house might be. And there was major side-eye going on from General Tony at dinner. She huffs off to breakfast, and Henry, amused at her demeanor, engages her with small talk about the flowers on the... Merriam-Webster defines an adaptation as a composition rewritten as a new form. Inspiration, in contrast, is defined as an inspiring agent or influence. These two ideas come up repeatedly for modern Austen pieces. What qualifies as faithful? Northanger Abbey, the novel, has only one major adaptation, produced by ITV in 2007 and written by Andrew Davies of Bridget Jones' Diary and Tipping the Velvet fame. It includes many dream sequences and a raunchier side of Austen via Catherine's gothic imagination. This isn't inaccurate, and it's a hugely fun way of keeping the comedic camp tendencies of the genre alive in a film of the novel. This period piece had a budget of $2 million and was faithful to the setting of a manor in rural England for its heroine's adventures. The film adaptation of an Austen work in 2022 was Persuasion, starring Dakota Johnson. In this piece, the narrator of Anne broke the third wall multiple times, and her character was displayed as clumsy and somewhat whimsical, a la Adventures of Getting Jam on her face in front of guests and the like. There was much public debate about the choice to advertise this film as a faithful adaptation. And disclaimer, in my opinion, this debate has absolutely nothing to do with its casting, which was one of the joys of the film. And in the 1995 BBC version, played by Amanda Root, was more insular. She was wizened by the time between her ill-fated courtship with Captain Wentworth and the present. Tonally, this is a lot more consistent with Austen's book. Persuasion was her last finished novel and some of her most mature character development. Now, an example of a work being inspired by an Austen book is 1995's romantic comedy Clueless, which modernizes the major plot points of Austen's novel Emma. Cher is the heroine who shares similar traits to Emma Woodhouse: popular, somewhat naive, vain but endearing, and the character of her friend Ty functions as Harriet, whom Cher takes under her wing to make over, only to find that the guy she is trying to matchmake for her friend is interested in her, just like the plot of the book. Sub-house parties for dinner parties and balls, and an overworked lawyer father in place of the original Mr. Woodhouse, and it's pretty clear that this movie is the Austen novel via Bel Air. The marketing for Clueless did not mention Austen. However, Cher and her high school days became their own popular piece in American culture, referencing Emma, but never vying outright for a spot in the Austenian canon. To be clear, I am not comparing myself or my work to a major motion picture, but the movies mentioned are good examples of ideas on how to address the use of public work as inspiration or a more literal vehicle for a new piece. It is exciting to use Austen as a dialogue in art, but with time, space, and major character updates. Hot Goth Summer drafting is involving me reading the piece thoroughly and then taking time away from it in hopes of using imagination like Catherine and coming up with new ways of seeing. In no way will I be marketing this as a total adaptation of Jane Austen. In sum, Gothic literature and music directly address culture and the world around us via class politics, feminism, and new ways of seeing the obscure as beautiful. Austen, through satire, did convey her own worldviews in Northanger Abbey. She had the opportunity to revise them with the book over her lifetime, though she might not have framed her frustrations within publishing in quite the same way. In drafting this play so far, it has been a gift of an experience, a hope for inspiring others towards loving reading fiction for the first time or returning to that love, and to try to experience wonder like Catherine in our everyday life. As mistakes like misplacing a catering bill might lead you or someone around you to, quote, receive and enjoy felicity, as Catherine eventually does with Henry.